Welcome to Paranormal M, where we delve into the darkest corners of the supernatural. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to stay up to date with our latest eerie tales. We hope you have a hauntingly good time listening. Shadow figure in my parents' basement. In 2005 and 2006, I was just 16 or 17 years old, living in my parents' basement, and I had recently started dating a girl who claimed to have the ability to communicate with spirits. Initially, I was skeptical of her abilities, but being a teenage boy, I was more attracted to her than concerned about her claims. One day after coming back from a soccer game, I went downstairs to find everything pulled out from under our staircase in the laundry room. When I asked my dad what had happened, he told me that the cats had been going under the stairs instead of using the litter box, so he had to clean it up. I helped him out a little bit before heading to my room to take a shower. My girlfriend was coming over, so I wanted to freshen up. About 10 minutes into my shower, I started hearing loud and aggressive banging on the door. Bang, bang, bang. I assumed it was my dad needing something from me, so I shouted back, "1 second, Dad, I'm just in the shower." But the banging continued. Bang, bang, bang. I was getting a little bit annoyed now and shouted, "Jesus Christ, I'm in the shower, give me a minute." But the banging persisted. And this time I was furious, so I grabbed a towel and stormed over to the door and flung it open, saying, "Kay, what do you want? I'm taking a shower." And to my surprise, no one was there. I was weirded out at this point, and chills ran down my spine. The basement always creeped me out, so I poked my head out and looked to the other side of the basement, thinking maybe my dad stormed off or something like that. And then I saw it. A black figure standing there, as if I had caught him off guard. It had no eyes, no mouth. Just a figure looking at me. We stared at each other for a second or two, and then it moved across the hallway towards the laundry room. I slammed the door shut and I started hyperventilating. What was I going to do? I had to pass the laundry room to get upstairs. I quickly got dressed and gingerly opened my door to look on the other side of the basement, but there was nothing there. No sign of the figure. I tiptoed towards the other side of the basement until I could see the stairs, and then ran up. The first thing I did was call out to my dad, but my mom answered, saying that he was in the garage. I ran to the garage and asked my dad if he had been banging on my bedroom door. He looked at me confused in hell and said, "No, why?" I didn't know what to say. I was in shock. If that thing could physically hit my door, what else could it be capable of? As I sat there in the garage with a blank look on my face, I heard the dogs start barking inside. That's when I realized that my girlfriend had pulled up outside. So I ran out to the front door to meet her, trying to play everything off as normal. But as soon as she walked in, she had a worried look on her face and asked, "What did you do?" Confused, I asked her what she meant, and she said, "You've changed something about the house. Whatever you've changed, you need to change it back right now." I explained to her that my dad had just cleaned up a mess that the cats had made underneath the stairs, and we had to pull everything out. She told me to put everything back the way it was, so I hurriedly put everything back underneath the stairs in the laundry room, as it was before. I couldn't help but feel a little bit unnerved by her demand, but I tried to shake it off as her just being superstitious. After all, she's the one who claimed to communicate with spirits, not me. My girlfriend and I spent the evening watching movies and hanging out in my room, and I tried my best to forget about the strange incident earlier. But as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I kept hearing strange noises coming from the laundry room, shuffling sounds, as if something was moving around down there. Every time I heard a noise, I would tense up, my heart racing in my chest. I finally mustered up the courage to investigate, grabbing a flashlight from my room and cautiously making my way down the stairs. As I approached the laundry room, the shuffling sounds grew louder and more frenzied, and I could hear what sounded like faint whispers. My heart was pounding in my chest as I slowly pushed open the door and shone my flashlight around the room. At first I couldn't see anything out of the ordinary, but as I swept the beam of light around, I caught a glimpse of something moving in the corner of my eye. When I turned to focus on it, I saw the same black figure from earlier standing in the corner of the room. Its featureless face turned toward me. I froze, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of what was happening. But before I could take a step toward the figure, it vanished into thin air, leaving me alone in the silent laundry room. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my heart still racing, trying to come to grips with what I had just witnessed. Eventually, I managed to gather my wits and make my way back to my room, where I spent the rest of the night tossing and turning, unable to shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me. Over the past few weeks, I became increasingly paranoid and anxious. Every time I walked past the laundry room, I felt like I was being watched, like something was lurking just out of sight. I stopped sleeping well at night too, plagued by nightmares and waking up in cold sweats. I even started avoiding spending time in my room altogether, spending as much time as possible at school or hanging out with friends. Eventually, I mustered up the courage to confide in my girlfriend about what had been happening. At first, she was skeptical, but when I told her about the figure I'd seen in the laundry room, her expression turned serious. She told me that she had sensed a dark presence in the house from the moment she came over, but that she had been trying to ignore it. Together, we decided to try to do something about it. We spent hours researching online, trying to find ways to cleanse the house of negative energies or spirits. We burned sage and candles, sprinkled salt around the perimeter of the house, and even tried to communicate with whatever entity might be haunting us. But no matter what we did, the feeling of unease persisted. In the end, we eventually moved out of the house and into an apartment together. It was a relief to finally leave the basement behind, but the experience had left its mark on me. I never forgot the feeling of dread that would wash over me every time I would think about the black figure in the laundry room, or the whispers I heard in the darkness. And even now, years later, I sometimes wonder if that entity is still there, waiting for someone else to stumble across it. Weird screeching in my house. I've been renting a house with my wife for around 3 years now. And I have to say, it's been a great experience. It's everything we ever wanted, a full house to ourselves, and we're loving it. Recently, I started a new job on night shift. I got home around 5:30 a.m., and my wife was fast asleep. I decided to unwind by playing some games on my PC. However, at around 5:45 a.m., I heard a loud screech through my headphones. I took them off and looked in my room, only to find my wife was awake with our 3 dogs all staring at me like they were wondering what the hell was that. I went downstairs to investigate, but I couldn't find anything out of the ordinary. I was kind of confused, but I decided to go to bed anyway. The next day, my wife got home from work and walked into the room looking worried. She said, "I don't know how to tell you this, but that screech that happened a couple times when you weren't home." At this point, I was starting to feel a little bit worried. I was at work and my wife was at home alone. Should I be worried? Does a house make weird noises like this sometimes? What should I do? I decided to do some research and found out that a house can indeed make strange sounds, especially if it's an older house. Some of the sounds can be explained, such as creaky floorboards, expanding pipes, or even the wind blowing through the cracks in the walls. However, there are some sounds that can't be easily explained. For instance, the screeching noise my wife and I heard. Some people might dismiss it as a figment of our imagination, but I knew that it was real. I started to worry about my wife being home alone, so I decided to install a security system. I figured that this would give me a peace of mind, knowing that she was safe and secure. I also did some research on ghost sightings, just in case there was something paranormal going on in her house. But I didn't find anything that could explain the screeching noise. Over the next few weeks, I kept hearing a strange noise in the house. It was starting to drive me crazy, and I felt like I was going to lose my mind. I couldn't concentrate on anything, and I was always on edge. My wife didn't seem to hear the noises, and I was starting to wonder if I was going insane. One night, I decided to set up a camera in the living room to see if I could catch anything on film. I turned off all the lights, and I went to bed, leaving the camera running, and the next morning I woke up and I checked the footage. To my surprise, I saw something moving in the living room. It was a shadowy figure and it seemed to be moving toward the camera. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I showed the footage to my wife and she was just as shocked as I was. We decided to call a paranormal investigator to see if they could help us, and the investigator came over and did some tests, and they concluded that our house was indeed haunted by a spirit. They told us that that spirit wasn't harmful, and it was just passing through. We were relieved to hear this, but at the same time, we were still a little scared. We decided to leave the spirit alone and coexist with it. We got used to the occasional noises and strange occurrences, and we even started to feel like the spirit was a part of our family. Overall, the experience was a little unnerving, but we learned to live with it. The Board of Truth. As a child, I'd experienced a few strange occurrences that were also witnessed by my mother. Those experiences made me realize that there are some truths to the paranormal world. However, I never thought that I would personally have any experience with the supernatural until I became an adult. About 4 years ago, I experienced something that changed my life forever. First, I was excited about what had happened, but then, like the flip of a switch, everything turned dark, very dark. I was curious and I wanted answers, so I began investigating my own experience, doing everything I could think of, including things I'd seen on TV. Looking back, I now know that it was a huge mistake, but at the time I was trying to get answers, and I was willing to do anything. Even something that I'd always sworn that I would never do, attempt to use a spirit board. I did all of my investigating alone, which, again, another mistake. I would go to the cemetery where it all started by myself at all hours of the night. And one day, I got the bright idea of downloading a spirit board app on my phone. The first time I used it, I got just what I expected, garbage. But I didn't give up. After several attempts, I made one more, and this time, things were different. I was sitting at my kitchen table, turned on the app, and started asking questions. The answers were coming back quickly and accurately, and I thought to myself, wow, this time it's working. But I was still skeptical and thought to myself, I'm going to debunk this thing and bust it as a fake. I asked the spirit board if it could see me, and the answer was yes. I then asked for its name, and it responded with Maria. I asked where I was sitting, and it correctly answered kitchen table. I then asked what I was wearing, and then it answered correctly. Asked it where it was, and it replied with, next door in the cellar. Feeling confident that I had the spirit board app figured out, I asked it where it was located, and I asked, oh, so you're in the red brick one-story next door then? The spirit replied with a firm no. So I asked, which house are you in then? The answer made my blood run cold. The spirit replied with, gray 2-story on the corner abandoned. When I looked out my kitchen window, there was indeed a gray 2-story house on the corner of another street. It had been abandoned for several years and had a cellar, not a basement. I continued to have conversations with Maria through the spirit board app for several months. One night I started at 1 in the morning, and I didn't stop until about 7 a.m. It only felt like 20 minutes had gone by, but Maria could tell me things about myself that nobody else would know about. It would tell me about calls I had responded to years ago as a police officer and what I had seen or felt. My haunting became very horrifying for several years, and I still deal with it daily and nightly. An investigation was done at my house, and they got the name Maria as well. They said that Maria was actually a succubus that was attached to me. I stopped using the spirit board app a long time ago, but I'm still dealing with the very real issue of using one and not closing the door when done, using it by myself, and so on. I'm here to tell you that just because you use a spirit board and have no issues, it doesn't mean that your time isn't coming, and when it does, I feel sorry for what you may be dealing with. Please use spirit boards with extreme caution and never use them alone. The experience I had with Maria has left me with a deep understanding of the paranormal world and a newfound respect for its power. I've learned that spirits can attach themselves to us, and we need to take precautions to protect ourselves. Since my experience with Maria, I've sought the help of paranormal investigators, psychics, and other professionals in the field. They've helped me understand what I went through and how to protect myself in the future. I've also done a lot of research on the subject, reading books and articles and attending seminars and conferences. My experience has become mostly a passion, and I now use my knowledge to help others who are going through similar experiences. I've also learned the importance of keeping an open mind when it comes to the paranormal. People may dismiss the idea of spirits and ghosts, but the experience has shown me that they are very real, and I've come to believe that there is much more to this world than what we can see, touch, and hear. In conclusion, my experience with Maria and the Spirit Board app has left a lasting impact on my life. It taught me to respect the power of the paranormal world and to be cautious when dealing with it. I hope that my story will serve as a cautionary tale for anyone who's considering using a spirit board. Always use them with extreme caution and never use them alone. And remember, once you open the door to the spirit world, it can be difficult to close it again. Ask Reddit 1. I used to live in what I'd like to call a half house, with the address of 11800 half. It was basically a shack remodeled to be a house. Let me explain the layout. The front door led to the small kitchen with a window that faced the driveway. The opposite the window was a half wall to separate the living room, which we used as a bedroom. The actual bedroom was always freezing cold and super tiny. It was just off the living room and the bathroom. The bedroom was connected to what everyone would call the garage, which only had 2 access points. One from the bedroom and one from the outside by the driveway, just a few feet away from the kitchen window. I've always been a crazy insomniac, so one night while my boyfriend was passed out drunk to my left and our kid was to my right, I found myself lying in bed staring at the ceiling. Suddenly, I started hearing footsteps on the roof, loud footsteps. But despite the flimsy material, it never shook our house. Our house was long, not big, but long. But whoever this was managed to run across the entire roof, down the long way, in just a handful of steps. But they always managed to stop just above our heads. I added this to my telling of creepy crap that happened in that house to my boyfriend's family when we spent time with them on the weekends. However, my boyfriend always blew me off, and no one believed my stories. After months of this, my boyfriend finally got tired of my stories and decided to prove me wrong. I told him that he couldn't get drunk and that I'd wake him up when the stomping started. He agreed to have no drinks that night. Well, the stomping started and I woke him up. He heard the stomping. He jumped up, threw his work boots on, in his boxers, and took my giant Rambo knife with him. And he ran outside. I locked the door behind him and waited and listened. Then I heard the stomping run from the living room across the house to the driveway. Our driveway had rocks, those stupid white rocks that my boyfriend thought looked nice, all the way up and down the driveway, so when you walk on them, it has a very distinct sound. The thing got to the kitchen side of the house, jumped off the roof, and I heard those rocks just outside the kitchen window. I was too chicken to peek through the blinds, though. A few minutes later, my boyfriend came inside and said he didn't see anything except a cat. The cat was doing that thing he does when he wants to be petted more. The thing he does after someone's been petting him but stopped before he wanted them to. I told him the thing ran across and jumped into the driveway, that I heard the rocks. I never heard the stomping again, but other crazy shit started happening. His family finally believed me after that. After that night, I became obsessed with the paranormal. I started doing research and reading books and attending seminars and conferences. I wanted to understand what was happening to me and my family. I even reached out to paranormal investigators and psychics for help. They confirmed my suspicions that our house was indeed haunted. I learned that our house was built on Native American land, and there had been several tragic events that occurred in the area. I also learned that spirits can attach themselves to people and that we need to take precautions to protect ourselves. I started taking steps to protect myself and my family, including smudging the house and wearing protective stones. In conclusion, my experience with the stomping on the roof in our half house was just the beginning of my journey into the paranormal world. It taught me that we should always keep an open mind to the unknown and the unseen. We should also be respectful to the spirits and entities that might be sharing our space. My experience showed me that sometimes it takes a while for others to believe you, especially when it comes to the paranormal. But it's important to keep speaking up and sharing your experiences because it may help others who are going through something similar. I am grateful for my experiences in the half house because it led me to a path of understanding and acceptance. I've become a believer in the paranormal and use my knowledge and experiences to help others who may be experiencing similar situations. I've also learned the importance of protecting ourselves from unwanted entities and keeping our energy fields clear and balanced. In conclusion, our half house may have been small and humble, but it opened up a world of possibilities and experiences for me. It taught me to always trust my instincts, to speak up even when others don't believe you, and to be respectful of the unknown. I'll always be grateful for that old creaky house and the stomping on the roof that started it all. Ask Reddit 2. When I took my showers, I heard a lot of talking coming from various voices. It was hard for me to fully understand what they were saying, but I heard them calling out my name. It was strange because most people in my life only knew me by my nickname, which I've had for almost my entire life. Even my boyfriend and his family thought that my nickname was my real name. So when I heard my real name being called out, I answered back, calling out to them. After I responded, their conversation would continue, and at first, I thought it was just my imagination, but it kept happening. I would rush out of the shower, but it was just like my child and I inside, with all the doors and windows still locked. As I mentioned earlier, the house I was living in had been converted from something else. The house heater was located in the corner of the bathroom in plain sight without any kind of cover or door to hide it. Because of this, the pilot light would sometimes go out, and I'd have to light it by myself. The last time I had to relight the pilot light, I noticed something strange. There were names written all over the instruction sticker in a childish cursive and in pencil. One of the names on there was mine, which was odd because I'd never seen those names before. Not in any of the times that I'd gone to light the pilot light before. I asked my boyfriend's cousin who knew about the history of the house, and he knew who the previous occupants were, and if their names matched the ones on the water heater. He said that none of the names matched, which only added to the mystery. My birthday was coming up, and it just so happened to be on the same day as my boyfriend's extended family member's birthday, who was home from the Navy. A big party was being planned and everyone was getting ready. My boyfriend's cousin came over to my house and asked to use my shower because he was worried that he wouldn't get hot at his shower at his house next door. I knew that his family was very strict, so I decided to go to the family's house next door while he showered, just to avoid any potential issues. While I was at the family's house, the cousin finished his shower and came back to my house. He told me that I didn't have to mess with him and asked me why I kept calling his name and knocking on the window. I was confused and told him that I'd been at the family's house the whole time, sitting on his mom's couch. He questioned his mom in Spanish, and she confirmed what I had said. I asked him what happened, and he told me that someone kept talking from just outside the bathroom door and calling his name, and when he yelled back, no one would answer him. But the talking just kept going. It was all very unsettling, and we never did find out who or what was behind it all. Experiences from working in a real haunted building. Let me tell you about the time I worked at a haunted house in my hometown during October. It was an old building that was built back in 1916 and was originally a hotel. Over the years, it had changed hands several times, and it was a hospital and an apartment building at different points in time, among other things. The building had been abandoned for a while, but every few years someone would try to raise money and do something with it. Eventually, a local high school drama teacher bought it and turned it into a haunted house experience. I was initially brought in to be a substitute actor, but ended up getting a position because the girl who worked in the room before me refused to work alone. At first, she tried to stop people from telling me why, but eventually I found out that she had been scratched up pretty badly by something or someone while standing alone in the shower in the room. She still worked there, but just refused to be alone. As soon as I stepped into the room, I could feel a bad vibe. It was an unsettling feeling that would make me hate being there alone every night. The second thing I noticed was a rocking horse in the corner of the room. It was hanging in the corner, but it would rock all the time. I wasn't pushing it or anything, and there wasn't any particular breeze, it just rocked continuously. The next thing that caught my attention was a super loud sound of running water behind me all the time. The pipes in the building didn't work at all, so water shouldn't have been going through them. It also wasn't raining or anything. I never figured out what that sound was, but it was there every night. Another strange occurrence that happened quite frequently was our technology stopped working a lot. Our lights and sounds that we used for the performance would randomly stop working all the time. But it wasn't a total power outage or anything like that. It was just like strobe lights or speakers that would shut down. There were a few nights when I took my phone out of the box where all the actors put their phones, and my phone would go all wacky. I don't remember all the details as it's been years at this point, but when I turned on my phone, it was some sort of black-blue screen with colored or white text that covered the entire screen. It was weird that it only ever happened in that building. Despite all the creepy things that happened, though, I loved working there. The thrill of scaring people and the adrenaline rush that would come with it, unmatched. I guess it's true what they say. Some people just love the thrill of the unknown, and I'm definitely one of them. I just want to understand it. When I was younger, I lived in a house that was very active with paranormal things. There were many different experiences that people shared about my house, but my experience was a little bit different. It first happened when I was around 8 years old. I slept with my sister a lot because I was scared to be alone, and I was sleeping and I had this horrible dream, but it was weird. It was kind of like sleep paralysis, except I couldn't open my eyes, so everything was dark. During this, there was a deep pressure on my chest as if someone was sitting on it. I literally couldn't breathe. It was like something was holding me down and I couldn't move or scream. My sister shook me until I woke up because I was breathing funny, quote unquote. This continued to happen and happened more and more frequently. It was horrible and I couldn't understand what was happening. It felt like something was attacking me in my sleep. I would wake up gasping for air with my heart pounding. And I was too scared to tell my parents because I didn't want to be seen as weak or crazy. Instead, I suffered in silence and tried to find ways to cope with the terrifying experience. As the months went by, the attacks became more frequent and intense. It was like someone or something was trying to suffocate me. I couldn't escape the feeling being held down and being unable to breathe. I was terrified to fall asleep, and I'd often stay up until the early hours of the morning just to avoid the attack. It was affecting my life, and I felt like I was losing control. Eventually, my family moved to a different house, and the attack stopped. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and I could finally breathe again. I tried to put the experience behind me and move on with my life, but the memory of those terrifying nights stayed with me. Years later, I still wonder what could have caused those attacks. Was it a spirit or an entity that was haunting the house? Or was it just a strange medical condition that I was experiencing? I've done a lot of research on the subject, reading books and articles and attending seminars and conferences, and I've learned that sleep paralysis is a pretty common experience. But the added pressure on my chest is not. It could be possible that it was a spirit trying to communicate with me or even harm me, but I'm not really so sure. Looking back, I realized that maybe I should have been more worried about my experiences. I should have talked to someone about it and sought help. I was too afraid to share what was happening to me, and it took a toll on my mental and physical health. It's essential to take care of ourselves, and that includes seeking help when we need it. In conclusion, my experience with the attacks in my childhood was pretty traumatic. It left me with many questions and a deep curiosity about the paranormal world. It taught me that it's okay to ask for help and that we should never be afraid to share our experiences. I hope that my story will serve as a reminder to others that there's always help available and we should never suffer in silence. Human-shaped brown smoke. In 2020, I discovered that I had cancer. It was a difficult time for me, and I had to undergo surgery, chemotherapy, and other treatments for several months. But I was relieved when I finally finished my treatment in 2021. One day while I was taking a bath, I felt something strange. It turned out that the surgery site had ruptured after 5 months and it was oozing pus and blood. I was filled with despair and didn't know what to do. I was afraid to start treatment again, thinking that maybe the cancer had come back with a vengeance. At the time, my father owned a quarry that was located about 8 kilometers away from the city. It was a beautiful place surrounded by woods and with some family farms nearby. I decided to go there to clear my head and think about what to do next. The quarry had an open mine that was about 120 meters in diameter and 20 meters deep. There used to be a crushing plant located there, exactly where the trucks unloaded to the grinder. To take advantage of the force of gravity, it was located on the slope of the ravine about 30 or 40 meters high. From there, I could see an incredible view of the horizon. I parked my truck at the crushing plant and lay on top of it to watch the shooting stars. I don't know exactly how many hours passed, but it must have been something like midnight when I heard footsteps slowly coming towards me. I was armed with a pistol, but I had left it inside the truck, and all I had was a piece of wood lying there at the time. I was scared of being a criminal because we had problems with thieves, trying to maybe steal machine parts or other items like that in the area. But the footsteps seemed to come from the side of the cliff, which was impossible for anyone to climb. I even went back there to check it later. My second thought is that it was a jaguar. And because I'd been lying down for some period of time, whether it was a jaguar or a criminal, it might have thought that I'd fallen asleep. And as the steps got closer, I deduced that the figure was already on my side. I looked without moving my head and didn't see anything that was the height of a person. So I jumped with a piece of wood and screamed because, had to be an animal. Then I saw something that I'd never seen anything like before. I got goosebumps just writing about it. A human figure, completely dark brown, and it had no eyes, no mouth, and no ears. It looked like thick smoke, and it walked very clumsily, as if twisting. When I jumped, it still hadn't finished climbing. I froze, and it finished the climb. It passed by my side about a meter away from me. I deduced that it was just maybe my height, 1.90 meters or less. When I jumped up and screamed, it did absolutely nothing. It passed by me and followed the opposite path I took when I got there. Left the road and entered the forest. At that moment, I took the gun from inside the car. It walked for a while and came out again in the clear and started coming towards me. The night was very clear with an almost full moon. When it got in a safe distance, as it came toward me, I started shooting. I shot 10 times, and I remembered that I still had 12 rounds, because I fired a few shots when I arrived. I landed all the shots as it approached, but it didn't do anything. It didn't seem to hit anything. At that distance, I never missed. However, it stopped and went back into the bush. For the rest of the night, I remained on high alert, watching and listening for any signs of the strange figure that had appeared before me. I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled deep within me. Every rustle of leaves and snapping of twigs sent my heart racing with fear. Despite my best efforts, I couldn't explain what I had seen. The figure had moved like no human or animal I'd ever encountered. Its complete lack of features, save for its shape and color, left me feeling deeply unsettled. As the hours wore on, I tried to calm myself down by focusing on other things. I thought about my cancer, about how far I had come since my diagnosis, and how much more I had to live for. thought about my family and friends and how much they meant to me, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had taken hold of me. Eventually, as dawn began to break, the figure disappeared back into the woods, its footsteps fading away into the distance. I breathed a heavy sigh of relief, but my sense of unease remained. I packed up my things and drove back to the city, still shaken by what I'd experienced. Over the next few days, I tried to make sense of what had happened. I spoke to my father about the strange figure, but he refused to say much, only warning me to be careful if I ever went back to the quarry at night. I searched online for any accounts of similar sightings, but found nothing that matched what I had seen. In the end, I had to accept that what I had encountered might never be explained. But despite the fear and uncertainty that it brought me, it also reminded me of how precious life is, and how much we have to cherish and protect it. Unexplained fingerprints appearing in my girlfriend's mirror. Let me tell you about the strange occurrences happening in my girlfriend's place. She's always been afraid of the paranormal, and I'm always teasing her about it. We've been together for over a year now, and about 4 months ago, her ceiling fell above her head. It was pretty scary, and it left a dark stain on the ceiling, indicating some sort of water damage. I kept joking that we should do a Ouija board session at her place, but she refused, understandably so. Lately, my girlfriend's been getting increasingly worried about something else. She's been asking me if I've been leaving fingerprints on her massive mirror, which measures about 8 feet by 5 feet. I have not, and I've been teasing her about it, thinking it's just a silly joke. However, she's been very serious about it, fearing that it might be something supernatural. We've been cleaning the mirror thoroughly, but the fingerprints keep appearing, and today there were even more than before. I took some photographs of the fingerprints, and they're clearly fingerprints of a small child, about 3 feet up from the floor. The strange thing is that my girlfriend doesn't have any kids, so it's a bit eerie. To make matters worse, we once went to an old antique store near her place to buy each other creepy and old photos. We found some original photos from the mid-1800s, and I gave her one of a child. It's just a strange coincidence, but it's been making my girlfriend even more scared. I keep teasing her about the fact that her place might be haunted, but deep down I'm starting to wonder if there is something else going on here. The strange fingerprints on the mirror and the creepy antique photo are giving me the chills. Maybe it's time to take her fears seriously and do some investigating. Shadow people experience. Recently, my wife and 9-year-old daughter and I went on vacation to Northeast Georgia, where we stayed at a cabin. While I was excited to spend some quality time with my family, the trip turned out to be a nightmare. Throughout the entire week, I slept poorly and kept having horrible nightmares. It was unusual for me since I rarely remember dreams, but these nightmares lingered on, haunting me day and night. I started to wonder if the process of weaning myself off Celexa was to blame. But for my restless sleep, however, what happened next changed everything. One night while trying to fall asleep, I saw something that shook me to my core. I looked toward the door in the hall and saw a figure that was darker than the rest of the room with no lights on. The figure seemed to be disproportionately large, but with no features. It was as if the darkness was taking a shape in front of my eyes. After I saw it, the figure either crouched, disappeared, or sunk into the floor. It was a terrifying experience, and I couldn't explain what I had just seen. The following night was far worse as far as not feeling rested, and the worst dreams. I was completely exhausted due to the lack of good sleep, and I'm fairly open or sensitive to spirits, but I hadn't sensed anything ghostly in the house before this incident. But now, I was not only exhausted by lack of good sleep, but also freaked out. I started to question the safety of the cabin, wondering if there was something ominous lurking in the shadows. My wife mostly ended up sleeping in with our kiddo because she's afraid of a new place. But the few nights that she did sleep in the master bedroom with me, she also had disturbing nightmares and poor sleep. We both couldn't shake off the feeling of unease and terror that had engulfed us since our arrival. We had never experienced anything like this before, and it was starting to take a toll on our mental and physical health. We did some research on our own and found that many people have had similar experiences with shadow figures. These shadow figures are believed to be ghosts or entities that take the form of shadows. They are often associated with negative energies and feelings of dread. Although we were not entirely sure what we had seen, the possibility of encountering an entity or ghost in the cabin was pretty much overwhelming. In conclusion, our trip to Northeast Georgia turned out to be a nightmare. Unlike other vacations that we had taken before, the shadow figure that I had saw was not only terrifying, but it also left me with a lot of questions. We're still unsure of what we encountered in that cabin, but we know that it had a profound effect on our well-being. We learned that the paranormal world is real and shouldn't be taken lightly. We hope that our experience will serve as a cautionary tale for others and urge everyone to approach such situations with caution and care. Our voices. I've never really believed in the paranormal until this started happening to me and my brother. We keep hearing our names being yelled at us in our own voices, and it's freaking us out. The weirdest part is that it only happens in one place and always at night. We've tried to ignore it, but we can't deny that it's real. The strange occurrences always start with a knocking or banging sound, and then we hear our names being called. It's always behind us, and we never see anything there. It's like someone or something is following us around, but we can't see them. The most unsettling part is that when it speaks to me, my brother can't hear it, and when it speaks to him, I can't hear it. It's like it's only targeting one of us at a time. And what's even more disturbing is that it uses my brother's voice to yell at me, and my voice to yell at him. It's like it's mocking us or trying to scare us. We've tried to rationalize it and find a logical explanation, but we can't. It only happens in one place, and it's always the same pattern. We're starting to wonder if it's some kind of ghost or spirit trying to communicate with us. But why would it only say our names in the other person's voice? And why only one word? At first, we were really scared and would run away whenever we heard names being called like that, but now it's happening so many times that we're just like, what the fuck again? Shit. And we go home. We still don't know what's causing it, but we're hoping to find some answers soon. Never going back in. When I was a teenager, my family and I lived in eastern Kentucky, in the heart of the Appalachian Hills. Our small town was so remote that everyone lived miles apart from each other, and as a result, we often found ourselves searching for ways to entertain ourselves, like going ghost hunting or having sleepovers at friends' houses or parties in the woods. And one summer night when I was 17 years old, our group of 3 guys and 3 girls decided to visit an abandoned church that the guys had heard about. We set out in the car, but one of our friends wasn't able to join us. Since we had no service to tell him that we were headed on our phones, it was just the 5 of us in the car. No service. The abandoned church was located in a hollow, far from town, up the hill. We had to turn right off the main road, and then drove for about 45 minutes down a 1-lane street that curved over creeks and hills until it got extremely narrow and rural. The guys told us that once we got over a specific hill, we would start feeling odd, like someone was with us. It was also probably around 12 a.m. or 1 by the time it started. The area was hot and humid since it was in the middle of July, and we were in the car laughing and looking around as our driver took us over the creek and through the woods. After about 30 minutes, we made it to that hill that they had mentioned, and the car came to a stop in the middle of the road. The guys turned off the lights, and we watched and waited, but nothing really happened. This disappointed me, as I wanted to see something crazy, like lights or a demon standing in front of us or something. We decided to keep going to the church after a couple of minutes of silence and darkness. The guys were telling us about the last time that they had stopped in that spot. Apparently, they had a big commotion and they thought that it would recreate itself in the present. So we drove about 10 or 15 minutes more down this tight road between the mountains. Finally slowing down around a curve, the hills opened up into a clearing with tall grass. It was probably around 1 or 2 acres. In the far left of the property was a 2-story stone building that was clearly a church. Sitting in the dark, I couldn't stop staring at it. There were trailers in the next field with lights and cars, so it wasn't 100% desolate. I was so excited to see something. I searched the windows, convincing my eyes that I might peep a little figure peeping through the darkness, but I saw nothing. We parked on this concrete lot area, right off the road, and got out. The guys convinced us to hike through the grass to the building, and we went happily. The first story was the basement, and the second was the church itself. The guys led us up the steps that went to the second story through the front doors. I don't remember if we were inside or still standing outside, but our 6th friend pulled up about 10 minutes after us. He said that he couldn't get a hold of us since there was no service anywhere. He said someone wrote the initials of the street of the church, and it was located in the dirt of his car window, and decided to see, and luckily, his hunch was right. We all went inside at this point. This was a Southern Baptist type of church, and the sanctuary had all the windows broken out. There was a raised stage area where the preacher probably stood with a podium. The pews were all gone, so it was an open room with a black corner closet on the left of the stage, and a small door to the right of the stage, which led to the basement. The guys decided to venture down there alone, while the 3 of us girls stayed upstairs and do some ghost hunting. Armed with our phones as recording devices, we asked the usual questions like, "What's your name and who are you?" But there was nothing, just silence in response. As I sat on the stage, closer to the closet in the corner, I began to feel a sense of cockiness wash over me, which was not my usual demeanor. I couldn't explain why I was feeling that way, but I knew better than to challenge something I didn't understand, and I said, "I don't believe anything is here. Why don't you knock on something, make a sound, do something?" Then we heard a knock. My friend warned me, "It's going to follow you home if you don't be careful." But I brushed her off. Suddenly, the closet next to me started making subtle sounds as the dead leaves inside shuffled quietly. The 3 of us huddled together, bracing ourselves for what was going to come. We then heard footsteps from the front doorway to the church, and then from the closet. A cold wind, and the footsteps from the door started running towards us, progressively getting louder with each stomp. All 3 of us began to scream as the guys ran upstairs to meet us. I don't know why we didn't just run out of the building, but eventually we regrouped and made our way back to the car. One of the guys said that he heard a choir of people singing from downstairs, and one of the girls claimed to have heard a piano while they were regrouping. The next night, I was safe in my room, sound asleep. I had a dream that a huge black figure with claws came through our closed front door. It stomped up the steps the same way that we had heard in the church, and it entered my room. It slammed my door open, shoving the doorknob into the wall and causing damage. It came up to me asleep and unable to wake, and it shoved me out of my bed. I woke up on the floor with the door embedded into the wall. It was my first sleep paralysis dream. Since then, I've had similar dreams of this figure finding me, standing and staring at me, shoving its hand into my body and dragging out my organs. All while I couldn't move or scream. It's been years, and these dreams are not as common anymore. I never went back into that building because I truly believed whatever was there followed me home. Of course, we went back to the church constantly and it became popular, but I would wait in my car and whoever's vehicle took us each time. I've seen friends go back in and run, children chasing them in the grass, even when they didn't have kids with the group. I've seen eyes in the rearview mirror while leaving the hollow. I've even felt my long hair being pulled in the car while I waited, and even while I was sitting at home after visiting. I've had paralysis dreams since then, and I believe it was whenever I was in that church the first time that this all started. I'll never go back there, ever again. Has anyone else seen spirits or ghosts on a war battlefield? Whenever I visit Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, a Civil War hotspot, I always encounter strange sightings of spirits or ghosts, or whatever you want to call them. The first time I went, I stayed in a pre-Civil War house and saw something in my doorway. It was black and had red eyes, which was incredibly strange because I don't experience sleep paralysis. The next night, I saw a little girl playing with toys on the carpet in the children's room where I was staying. The next time I went to Gettysburg, I stayed in a renovated car shop that once belonged to a baseball player. However, every night at 3:11, I would wake up to a glowing figure holding a baseball bat. It was so vivid and surreal, I couldn't shake off the eerie feeling that it gave me. On my third visit to Gettysburg, I saw soldiers walking through the fields as we were driving in at night. It was a strange and eerie sight, and I couldn't help but feel unsettled throughout the trip. Thankfully, we only stayed for 3 days, and as soon as we left the town, I felt fine again. But I can't help but wonder if anyone else has experienced similar encounters in Gettysburg. The sightings I had were so vivid and lifelike that it's hard to dismiss them as being coincidences. It's like the place is a magnet for paranormal activity. Every time I visit, I'm bound to see or experience something bizarre. The scratching sound in storage space. I recently moved into a new house, and my room is in the finished attic. I love my room because of the cozy feeling that it gives me, and the view of the neighborhood is fantastic from up here. There are 2 tunnel-like storage spaces on either side of the attic that my family uses regularly, and the other day while I was working on my laptop, I heard a sort of scratching or dragging noise coming from one of those storage areas. Initially, I thought it was a mouse or a rat that had snuck up into the storage area, so I decided to investigate and looked around, but there was nothing to be found, no nesting or droppings or anything. I brushed it off as my imagination playing tricks on me, and I went back to work. However, 2 days ago, I heard the same noise again, and this time, I was sure that it was coming from the same storage area. I gathered my courage and went to check again. Still, nothing out of the ordinary. It was strange and inexplicable. I'm a total skeptic, I guess you would say, and I don't believe in ghosts or paranormal activities. But this event really freaked me out. I was concerned about what could be causing the sound. My house was only built about 20 years ago, and there have never been any deaths or accidents here. So what could it be? I tried to convince myself that it must have been something rational, but maybe it was a faulty pipe, or maybe it was the wind making noise, but deep down I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was going on here. I started paying more attention to the storage area specifically, and I noticed something strange. There was a cold spot in that area where I heard the noise. It was weird because the temperature in the rest of the attic was the same. I started to think that maybe there was a draft in the storage area, but when I tried to locate the source of the cold, I couldn't find anything. I even went as far as to ask my family members if they had heard anything strange in the attic, but they say that they hadn't heard anything. It was as if I was the only one hearing this noise. I couldn't get it out of my mind, and the more I thought about it, the more scared I became. I couldn't concentrate on anything else, and I started to feel paranoid. I was worried that something bad might happen, and I wouldn't be able to explain it. The more I thought about it, the more I became convinced that it was something paranormal. Maybe it was a ghost or a poltergeist that was haunting my attic. I knew that it sounded silly, but I couldn't think of any other explanation, and in the end, I decided to move to my bed to the other side of the room, as far away from that storage area as possible. I also made sure to keep my door locked at all times, and I still hear the noise every now and then, but I try to ignore it and tell myself that it's nothing to worry about. Despite my efforts to rationalize the situation, there's a part of me that still wonders what's causing this noise. I don't think I'll ever truly know, but I've learned to live with it. I'm just glad that whatever it is, it hasn't harmed me in any way. The haunting of a hotel. I'm an avid traveler, and I've been staying at numerous hotels, but none of them have left me with feeling shaken or terrified as my last experience at a hotel in Istanbul. Let me take you through my unforgettable and bone-chilling experience. It was a beautiful day when I arrived in Istanbul, Turkey. I checked into a hotel, a charming boutique hotel located in the city's historic district. The hotel was housed in a century-old building with a rich history, and I was immediately captivated by its old-world charm. The hotel staff was friendly and the atmosphere was welcoming. Little did I know that I was about to encounter something far beyond my imagination. On my first night, I started experiencing strange things. At first, it was just small things like faucets in my bathroom turning on by themselves, objects moving inexplicably, and eerie whispers echoing through the halls late at night. I brushed them off as my imagination playing tricks on me, but as the days went on, the encounters intensified. One night, I woke up to the sensation of someone sitting on the edge of my bed, but when I looked around, there was no one there. Another night, I heard footsteps pacing outside my door, but when I opened it, the hallway was empty. I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched, and the air in the hotel seemed to be constantly charged with an otherworldly energy. As I ventured deeper into the hotel, I discovered that this hotel had a dark past. It was said to be built on an ancient burial ground. The locals whispered of a tragic incident that occurred there years ago. Legend had that it was a family that was brutally murdered in the hotel, and their spirits still haunted the premises. Determined to uncover the truth, I delved into the hotel's history and discovered chilling details. There were reports of unexplained deaths, strange occurrences, and guests who had checked out abruptly, unable to bear the paranormal activity present there. The hotel staff seemed to be tight-lipped about the incidents, but their nervous glances spoke volumes. As my stay continued, the encounters grew more intense. I heard disembodied voices whispering my name, saw shadows darting in and out of the corners, and witnessed objects moving on their own. The atmosphere in the hotel became suffocating, and I found it hard to sleep or even feel at ease. One fateful night as I lay in bed, I saw a figure standing at the foot of my bed, staring at me with empty eyes. My heart pounding in my chest as I tried to scream, but my voice was silenced. The figure disappeared before my eyes, but the terror remained. With my nerves frayed and my sanity questioned, I decided to check out of that hotel the next day, desperate to escape the malevolent presence that had tormented me throughout my stay. As I left the hotel, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something had followed me out, a cold presence lingering on my shoulder. I shared my bone-chilling experience with a few Turkish friends, warning others about the haunted hotel. I was shocked when others shared their encounters and experiences at the hotel. Some claimed to have had pretty much the same story that I had, while others vowed to never stay there again. To this day, I can't explain the inexplicable events that occurred at the hotel, but I am certain that I encountered something beyond the realms of the natural world. My story serves as a cautionary tale for those who dare to stay at that hotel, a place where the veil between the living and the dead seems to be disturbingly thin. Ghost Children from Texas City Explosion. Let me preface my story by telling you that I live in a town right on the Galveston Bay in South Texas. It's a quiet town where you would never guess that anything dark had ever happened. Nevertheless, in 1947, a ship named Grand Camp exploded at the pier and ignited one of the largest tragedies in the United States. And all 576 people were killed, and the southern part of the town was almost vaporized. The destruction runs to within half of a mile of my 1920 bungalow, which I bought in 2010. I didn't know at the time, but there are frequent echoes of the people who lived here in 1947. One night when we were in bed, my husband was awoken at 4:30 a.m. by the sounds of two little girls playing with what sounded like a ball and jacks. He listened for a minute as they giggled and played by the bedroom door. He said they sounded somewhere between 6 and 8 years old. He was fully awake and facing our bedroom windows. There was enough light that he was seeing the false dawn along a slight glow behind him. I was on the side of the bed closest to the door and asleep. After a moment or two, the oldest girl said, "Watch this," to the other child. She called out, "Mama, Mama," which any mother knows will rouse you out of the deepest sleep. I immediately sat up in panic saying, What, are you okay?" And they giggled to see that I responded. My husband silently grabbed my arm and pointed to the foot of the bed. There is a patch of doorway that looked lighter and wavy to me, and I could hear a little whisper, but I couldn't make out what was being said. I looked at him. He looked at me, wide-eyed. We both decided to be massive chickens and lie down again and pretend that it never happened. That was a little creepy. We weren't sure how to deal with ghost children. Everything was quiet for about 10 minutes. I started drifting back off to sleep. My husband settled back down with his back to the door and started to doze off again. We heard the little game start up again, and a silvery glow was at the foot of the bed. I watched as it came around to my husband's side of the bed. He was lying on his side, and the little glow moved to where his pillow was. I was too afraid to move or say anything. He had his eyes squeezed shut. I don't blame him. As I watched, I looked as if two little hands pressed down on the bed next to his face, and the glow hovered closer and closer to his face. I'm not sure who screamed first, but we both did. There was a tinkling little laugh. It wasn't mean. It reminded me of a small child who are checking to see if they can wake you up and play with them. As we grabbed each other, thoroughly shaken, the little glow slipped right through the wall and vanished. I don't mind that the little girl and others came through once in a while, but it can surprise and shake you. We have a few stories if anyone's interested. I'd be happy to share them with you.